Good evening, everybody. Welcome to another live stream with me, Charlie Lambden. This is Moving Home with Charlie, and I also have on the line John Rose from the Right Move Property Podcast. John, can you say hello? And can I just want to check my audience can hear you?
Yeah, hi Charlie. Just want to say how encouraging it is. To be on a Charlie Lambden live stream. I've got a bigger audience than when I was on the BBC now.
That's very kind of you. Could I just check that everyone who's listening to me and watching me could actually hear John's voice? I want to make sure you can hear him, because otherwise you'll be listening to just me again, like all my other videos, where it's normally just me. But if anyone could just say, yes, you can hear John, that'd be great. And then John's going to be asking me, so a brief intro, this video is, John is the host of a podcast called The Right Move, property podcast, which he hosts with a co-presenter and estate agent and RICS registered valuer called Andrew Simmons, who's also an owner of a couple of estate agents. And if you haven't given it a listen yet, I put a link in the description below to it. Give it a listen. It's good fun. They're saying, yes, they can hear you, but you're a bit faint. All right, I shall turn it up. There we are. And normally I just do a few minutes. I think on this channel you've seen a few videos where I record a few audio rants. No, it's normally a rant because John knows exactly how to trigger me into a rant.
I've got a track record now of that.
Yeah. And this time John's been very brave and actually asking me for a longer conversation. So John, thanks very much. Thanks for having me, and welcome to my show at the same time. And yeah, what are we talking about?
Well, obviously now we have this change of government. We have a change of the order at number 10 in the Palace of Westminster and stuff. But the first thing, really, before we get into the kind of meat and drink of housing, I want to tee up is it was very noticeable, I thought, in the run-up to the election, that you voiced the opinion that no matter who formed the government after 4th July, there was this dearth of leadership. Do you still feel that way?
I'm afraid I do. I think there's been a very well choreographed and staged managed impression of swift action and leadership, but you can tell you can't do that number of speeches and appearances unless it's all pre-planned, scripted and choreographed. So it's been in the pipeline for quite a long time, and it's done very well, and it appears to be very impressive. But my overall problem with the new government, and this is not a party political thing, this is a purely governmental functional observation. I don't know if I've ever told you this, John, but over the last 30 years, as the owner and runner of several small businesses, I've had two relevant experiences here to what we're about to discuss. One is I've employed somewhere in the region of about 500 people in total over that time. And as anyone else who's ever employed people will know, as an employer, you quite quickly get wise to hearing the sort of speak that tells you that it's a lot of conversation, a lot of talk, but not a lot of progress in reality is actually being made towards any deliverable objective. And I suppose it's 30 years of that training, and at one stage I was running an organization that was 120 people in 3 countries, all having to cooperate on a 24-hour basis. And it involved technology and property and logistics and people and communications on a tiny scale by comparison. But even on a tiny scale, I got a feeling of what it actually takes to deliver stuff. And it's very rare when you come across someone who actually delivers. Doesn't come up with excuses and reasons and all the rest of it. Even they might be legitimate, but so far, I was genuinely hoping to be rooting for the new government to actually deliver something, because I don't care who's in government if they're delivering. Genuinely, I don't care who's in government if they're delivering prosperity and improved quality of life and opportunity for the country as a whole. I would support anyone who succeeds in doing that. So,
I mean, as you followed the campaign, Charlie, were there any of the parties saying anything vaguely interesting or constructive on housing and house building?
At face value, the best housing manifesto was the Liberal Democrats. Okay. And theirs was by far the most detailed. They'd had a conference all about it. They had a conference paper. It was the best research, the most detailed. It showed the deepest understanding of the actual problems. And it was the only one, along with the Greens, but given that the Greens are perhaps not as close to potentially being in power as the Lib Dems might be, and it didn't have as much meat on the bones in the Greens manifesto, they said the same thing. But the Lib Dems headline housing pledge was, we will build 150,000 social homes a year on top of the private sector building around 200 to 250,000 a year, totaling 380,000. And for reasons we may or may not go into in this conversation, it is my profoundly held view that there is no workable permanent solution to the housing crisis in this country unless the government takes responsibility for its own housing obligations. Okay, and what I mean by that is all of the people that councils are obliged to house, whether they be people who fall on hard times, people who are unemployed or too sick to work, or whatever it might be, or whether they are asylum seekers or anyone else who the government is currently legally obliged to house. At the moment, the government is outsourcing that to the private sector, and the private sector only does things for one reason, which is money. But the governments, whilst managing finances properly is a major part of their role, they have obligations that are non-financial ones, which is you must provide houses for these people. And I'm really heartened to see some of the reactions since the election from the mainstream journalists actually questioning them on their housing. Housing has been actually one of the top line topics being in the news a lot, which I'm really, really happy to see. And the journalists are starting to go, hang on a second, how are you going to do this? And Rachel Reeves, there was some miscommunication between Rachel Reeves and Angela Rayner, where one of them said, we're going to be building social housing. One of them went, no, we're not. We're going to be relying on the private sector to build social housing, which doesn't work. Anyway, so, sorry, I will keep rambling until you stop me, so I'm going to stop myself sometimes.
Well, there's a few things to unpick there at the very least. And pretty much the first thing Rachel Reeves says as Chancellor is mandatory housing targets will return under this Labour government. Did they work before? Can they work now? What's your feeling on this, Charlie?
So the mandatory housing targets were never legally binding. So they were called mandatory targets, but as anyone who's ever had to work with targets knows, a target is nothing more than that. It's a target. It is not a cast iron guaranteed commitment to delivery. It's just a target. They've never been hit. The mandatory housing targets were dropped by Michael Gove for some reason. And they're now saying we're going to reinstate mandatory housing targets. But literally, that's like saying we're going to do what we all knew didn't work last time. We're going to do it again. And just to back me up on this, Radio 4 interviewed a planning barrister called Zach Simon, who's a really impressive guy actually, who clarified as a barrister that mandatory housing targets are not legal. They are purely policy. So they're not binding. He said the good thing about it is that as policy, they're easy to change. But he said they were never mandatory, legally speaking. They were never actually something that was legally required, and therefore there was no consequence if they were failed to be met. And so, without Labour providing anything new alongside those mandatory targets, I'm afraid it's more grandstanding. And some people will say, yes, but they're going to reform the planning framework. Okay, let's see how that goes. Because there was another article came out today, which I shared on X, showing that actually the number of sites that had planning permission granted in the last 10 years was enough for 300,000 homes a year to have been built. But they weren't built anyway. And so it raises a question whether or not planning, now in some areas, there's no doubt that planning restrictions are definitely preventing house building. There's no question about that. But in other areas, not so much. So they are demonstrating, and they're also demonstrating a really naive and really commercially, I'm trying to find a word that's not too rude to use. They're displaying commercial ignorance and thinking that they are somehow going to be able to force private companies who are legally required to remain profitable, in other words, it's viable, they can't force them to do anything. All they can do, which is what they can already do, is for every X number of houses you build, you've got to build Y affordable homes. Well, that's already been in place, and it hasn't worked. It just hasn't worked. So I genuinely think when you look at the backgrounds of people like Angela Rayner and Rachel Reeves and Keir Starmer, they have no hands. I mean, Angela Rayner has first-hand experience of social housing. Important. Yeah. That's really important, because that means that there's someone in real power now with a real understanding of what it means. And she was a carer as well. And whilst I don't agree with much of Angela Rayner's politics, I really actually find myself with the largest amount of hope being on her ability to deliver, because she strikes me as the kind of person that doesn't take prisoners, and she doesn't let people stand in her way. She knocks you down if you stand in her way. So I sense a sort of personal commitment from Angela Rayner to actually get stuff done this time.
There is, invariably, sorry to interrupt you, Charlie, but there is invariably this sort of schism that presents itself, isn't there? Because in one breath, the Chancellor is saying, in these, and I'll quote directly here, in these first 72 hours, we have done more to reform the planning system than previous governments have done in the last 14 years. And then goes on to articulate that local communities and local authorities will decide where housing is built. Surely you're building a big fat case of inertia into this, aren't you?
Yeah, I'm afraid so. And I mean, I agree that these decisions should be taken at a local level, but unfortunately, for reasons that are both official public reasons and also unofficial private reasons about how the world really works at a local level, it's not working. So one of the things that, I mean, actually, you heard it here first. I am going to offer, for what it's worth, I'm going to offer Angela Rayner my assistance in whatever way I can to provide any guidance or advice into how to actually navigate the realities of the housing market, if I can. And people could take a laugh and go, yeah, Charlie, sure, they're going to want to help you. But I'm genuinely thinking about actually writing to her and saying, these are the things that you need to do, which are actually within the government's power to do, because there's no point in making claims about things that are not within your control. And it is not within the government's control to mandate private sector house building. It just isn't. We have a mostly free market economy, although it's not unfettered. It is a free market economy where companies can do what they like. And if you can't, as a government, go around saying, you're going to do this, you're going to do that, they're going to go, nope, we don't have to. Sorry. There is no legal basis on which you can force us to do anything. And so until a government understands that they will have to build themselves to meet their own housing obligations, we won't have a solution to this problem.
I think it's a fair summary of some of what you've said, Charlie, already, that you've been fairly impressed with the standard of journalism reporting and general questioning that's gone on in these very, very early days of the new government. But other than the mainstream media, where does scrutiny come from on housing policy? Is it do we need almost a separate body? I hesitate to use the word quango, but should there be more effective scrutiny of it?
I'm not sure that even if you could implement effective scrutiny of it, it would actually result in much. I mean, if I was advising the government on what to do, I would say that they need to create some regional roaming housing bosses that are central government figures that have real power, like serious power, that can go from town to town, government, so it's local government to local government, council to council, and say, what do you need to get this done? So that, because the requirements vary enormously in different places. There's no point having a national policy that's one size fits all for the whole country. That's not going to work. It never has, never will, right? But if you had these people who were given the mandate and the power to go to locals and say, tell me what you need, because presumably the councils want to solve their local housing crisis, okay? And if they can set out what they need, maybe they'll say, we need the planning department to be set on fire, burnt to the ground and rebuilt with new people, please. Then the housing bosses would have the power to go, okay, done. What else do you need? They might say, we need funding to build our own housing. And if we can fund our own housing construction that we own, we can meet our own local housing needs. And they might have the power to go, okay, done. Do you have someone to build it? Do you know how you're going to actually provide the workforce to do that locally? But the point is that's the only way these things get done, because you cannot wave a national magic wand and solve any of these issues. But at a local level, unfortunately, they don't have the power to solve it locally, because they are in effect hamstrung by a lot of national policies. So it's definitely fixable. I mean, one of the other things is that I think off the top of my head, there are currently between 600,000 and 700,000 officially vacant, empty homes. Not including ones that are awaiting demolition and reconstruction. These are just homes. And one of the biggest causes of these is homes where people have died and the house is being left to the offspring, but the offspring can't agree what to do with it. And they just sit there for years. And one of the things you could do very quickly is give local councils compulsory purchase power that says, if you have not either occupied or sold or rented out or in some way constructively used that property within 2 years, then we get to buy it at a knockdown price and you don't get to say anything about it at all. And that would, I mean, if you're thinking about it, right, 700,000 empty homes is almost half their entire house building target for the 5 years that are sitting there empty, habitable now. And there was an article, so again, legislation could be passed to at least free up some of those. And even if all you did was go, okay, 20% of those, that'd be 120,000 homes like that, ready, not to be built, ready, right there straight away. That would either the owners would go, okay, let's rent it out. Great, that's a win. That's provided a home for someone. Or they'd say, okay, let's move in and live there. That also frees up accommodation elsewhere. Or they might say, okay, let's sell it. Or they might just go, fine, let the council buy it. But either way, that lot sitting there empty is a major quick win, for example.
All right, so here you are, Charlie, presenting a suite of potential problems and answers, rather, and suggestions for this new government of ours. I mean, if Labour were here now defending themselves, putting their point forward, I dare say one of the things they would say is, well, look, we haven't got this the regional housing czars, if you like, to use that cliche, the kind of thing you illustrated there. But what we are saying is 300 new planning officers are being promised. Is that achievable? I don't know, maybe your live stream audience can tell me what it takes to get somebody up to speed and be a qualified planning officer, how long that takes. But do you think that will make a difference?
In a word, no. And let's just be kind and say, okay, Labour, right? Okay, let's just assume that's actually the problem. And that once 300 planning officers are in place, that fixes the problem. How long does it take to advertise, interview, recruit, train up those guys? Okay, best case scenario, you're talking about 9 to 12 months before they're actually trained up and in place. Once they've been ramped up. I mean, in a smaller business, you could do it much faster, right? But local government does not move quickly. So you've got these 300 planning officers in place a year from now who start to process planning applications a bit faster. I mean, you're still talking about nothing really happening, because from when a planning application is approved until the homes that are going to be built on that approved site are ready to move in, 5 to 7 years? Not in this government. Not in this government. I mean, that doesn't mean it's a bad idea. I'm not saying it is a bad idea. What I'm saying is it's not going to solve the house building shortage. And by the way, it's also worth pointing out that there is not a national shortage of homes. There are many local and acute severe shortages of homes, definitely. But there are plenty of areas where there really aren't. And there are empty homes. As in new build empty homes that are not sold. I'm not talking about the ones that someone's died and they haven't sorted out probate yet. I'm talking about these are ready to move into. No one's buying them. Were they built in the wrong place? Maybe they haven't got the right local infrastructure. Who knows? But again, it is a highly localized thing, and so national building targets even if they're met, don't necessarily solve the problem if they aren't being built in the right places.
Speaking of which, when we talk about the stock that hasn't yet been built, there's a quote here from a planning consultant to the effect that there is a widespread misunderstanding, he says, of what the green belt actually is. We're kind of getting to semantics here, and therefore a political intractability around it. Is that fair, or do you think, again, something else that's just going to kick stuff into the long grass here?
This whole green belt phenomenon is something that's just clickbait for the media. In the real world, nobody is suggesting building on areas of outstanding natural beauty. Nobody, right? No, nobody wants that. No one's suggesting that. There are all kinds of sites and land and types of land. Now, there'll be places where there's less. In towns, there's absolutely nothing stopping us building upwards, right? Building technology for higher rise blocks. If you go to Scandinavia now and you look at some of the modern stuff they're building there, it's so high quality. It's such nice accommodation. It's modern. It's really sturdy. You can tell it's going to last, but it's going to stand there for 50 to 100 years. We're not doing any building like that I know of. Actually, to be fair, I was in London last week, and there's a whole lot of new stuff that's gone up between Battersea and Wandsworth, which look like they're sort of brick towers. And they look quite nice, and they do look like they're actually built to last, those ones, but they're all empty because they're £500,000 a pop. And people who need people need affordable homes ain't buying £500,000 apartments in Wandsworth. So you know, but I did a video actually on the Moving Home with Charlie YouTube channel where I went up in the plane with my kids and said, right, guys, is there a space to build houses or not? And you know, no one's talking about using farmland, but you've got to remember that farmers, people go, oh, you can't build on farmland because of food production. We already can't feed ourselves. Anyone who's watched Clarkson's Farm will know this, right? Farmers aren't even allowed to use all their land to make food. They're being forced to rewild a lot of it, that kind of stuff. Yeah. So it's utter nonsense that building on land is going to impact our food production. That is just utter nonsense. And if you roughly only 2% of the UK's entire land mass is covered in residential building. Okay, 2%. There's a bit more if you include commercial buildings and industrial units, that kind of stuff. Gets up to 3.5%, I think, but 2%. So you could increase Britain's housing stock, theoretically, by 50% by asking landowners of suitable land to give up 1% of it. And I can tell you, anyone who owns large amounts of land is going to have 1% of it. Like, I don't even think I've ever been in that corner of it. Yeah, that's fine. So it's complete nonsense. So when you hear about this ridiculous phrase of people saying, you can't concrete over the countryside, I mean, patently stupid comment, really. You couldn't if you tried. You couldn't if you tried.
No. The last thing that I'd like to put to you, Charlie, is to shake up housing, or at least to do what Labour believes it needs to do over the course of the term of this next government. Are we expecting, we're asking too much from our political masters, because we are, he says, peering into the hornet's nest, profoundly steeped, no getting away from this culture of seeing a home as a means to make profit. Is that where much of the problem lies?
The fact that has been the approach in the culture for a long time is one of the primary reasons that housing affordability is at its worst in 100 or 200 years or something, right? Because yes, people have seen it. And to be fair, you know, if you were born at the right time and you bought at the right time, you've done very nicely from it. But if you are now in your 60s or 70s, and you've got £1 million worth of equity, that's going to get wiped out in care costs. There's going to be nothing left for your kids. So it's that ship has sailed. If you just look at the GDP per capita growth and the country's GDP growth, it's flatlined at best since 2007. So property values are struggling. Commercial property values have already tumbled, and I think people are beginning to wake up to the fact that things like Help to Buy have created the affordability problem. They've helped to create the affordability problem, and that's not going to help. So I also think that more and more people are becoming aware of just how severely the housing crisis is impacting ever increasing numbers of people. It's impacting productivity, it's impacting mental health, it's impacting children's opportunities. And people are beginning to realize that actually residential property for profit. And listen, if you are someone who buys old rundown places and converts them into modern refurbished houses, and you do that for a living, that's cool, right? That's a decent way to make a living. You can buy a rundown old place, needs loads of work, and that's what you do for business. That's great. It's a business, right? And you can actually add value, create value, and make a living doing that. But that's not the same as just buying something, sitting on your sunbed for a few years and then selling it for £250,000 extra. That ship has sailed, and the reason that the funding and finance and the low interest rates and the quantitative easing and all of that kind of stuff that made it possible is one of the biggest causes of the housing crisis that we've got now. And to those, I mean, I am aware that there is an older demographic that doesn't want anyone building on their countryside view that they've got.
Yeah.
But I would say to those people, how are your kids and your grandkids doing in affording a home? Connect up the dots.
Yeah.
Because you might think that you not wanting any houses built on your line of sight isn't going to affect anyone else. But because so many people are doing that, it is affecting people. And there are people with very good six-figure jobs who can't afford a family home. So,
yeah, we continue to look to you, Charlie, and for many blogs and live streams, etc., with joining up those dots. As somebody far wiser than me said, we live in interesting times. Thanks ever so much for your contribution tonight and holding our brand new government to account. Charlie, thanks so much.
Thanks very much, John. I will do. And I'm going to stick around with my audience here for a while. I've got 400 people here and some questions coming in. So I'm going to take a few of those while I'm here.
All right. All the best. Cheers.
Thanks, John. Cheers. Bye. Oh, I want to start with this comment, guys. Cheds1. I'm a brickie. New builds are crap. I'm going to show you something. This is frontline stuff. I sit here at my desk watching these places being built, and I'm living in one of them, right? I'm living currently, this is one of those new builds. It's nice. And we haven't had any snagging problems. So on that basis, they're pretty good quality, but they are timber framed. I don't know if you can see that. You can just seal the timber framing. There's no brickwork. There's no concrete that I can tell. They're pretty lightweight. They're incredibly well insulated. Our energy bills are like astoundingly low. But I just wonder how long they're going to last. Because, inside these buildings, you can't hang a heavy mirror on the wall. It just tears through the plasterboard. And if you've got to find the joists and stuff, then it's a bit of a better chance. But why can't they build solid old brick houses like they used to? Maybe they're more expensive to build. Maybe they're not as energy efficient. I don't know. I actually don't know. I'm not a construction expert. Yeah. Cheds1 says timber frame rubbish. AM says, which of the Three Little Pigs houses do they most resemble? Yeah. So do we have any other questions, guys? Any other questions have I missed before I go that you'd like to ask me? I want to say something, actually. I know some people have found my criticism of Labour, and now that they're in government, criticism of government, they found it negative. And they're saying, give them a chance. Let's give them 5 years. I've got two things to say to that. Number one, there are literally millions of people who cannot afford to wait 5 years to see if Labour can fix the housing crisis. And so anyone who's saying, let's give them 5 years, let's give them a chance. I hear the positive message of optimism. Listen, let's not criticize them before they even start. And I do hear that. But at the same time, anyone who thinks, oh, let's wait and see, you are automatically speaking from a position of luxury where you're not affected if they fail. All right. Because I would love you to go and talk to the people who are in temporary housing, or people who have got, a family squeezed into a 1-bedroom flat, and all those kinds of people, and say, you okay there for 5 more years? Yeah. You want to save 5 more years in there? Just while we wait and see if they've got it right. I'm not going to stand by and not speak up when I see no hard evidence that anything is going to change. I'm looking for it. I'm open to it. I would welcome it. I am not anti-Labour. I am not anti-Starmer. They are our government now, whether we like it or not, for the foreseeable future. Therefore, I want to support them. And that's why I'm talking about actually, for what it's worth, contributing and seeing if I can, offering to help. Yeah, genuinely. Because I think I can offer some perspectives that might help meet the needs of the developers they want to involve. I might help to warn them off about, if they're going to deal with investors, how to deal with very carefully investors so that you don't get chewed up and spat out, like, for example, I don't know, Thames Water, because that's what happens. That's what happens when investors don't care. Investors only invest to make a return. They don't, whatever they say about it, they don't care, right? They will place their money wherever they get the biggest return, and it's not their problem. As long as it's a legal investment, they're not responsible for it. Okay. That is why I'm very worried about this whole Labour private finance initiative and giving private investment into government. It's just, if you don't want the NHS privatised, why would you be happy with the Labour government privatising effectively parts of the state? It's not good. It's not good. I know that a lot of people don't like Angela Rayner. Listen, first of all, it doesn't matter whether you like them or not. It only matters whether they deliver or not. I mean, we all have to work with people, right? Don't mean that we may or may not like, but what matters is, are they a productive contributor to the overall effort of whatever is being worked on? So it's of no consequence to me what they're like, whether people like them or not. The only thing that matters, as far as someone in a role with a responsibility to deliver things is concerned, is, will they actually deliver? And I'm telling you, I am expecting Angela Rayner to actually deliver some stuff. Whether or not it's good stuff or not, I don't know. Whether or not it'll happen because she's ousted Keir Starmer and become Prime Minister, I don't know. Whether or not it'll be because she's actually listened on the housing front and got stuff done, I don't know. My biggest worry is that she'll get stuff done, but it'll be financially unwise and it'll just kick the can further down the road and make more problems. But in my experience, and I do have experience of this, people with Angela Rayner's background do not suffer waffling fools easily or for very long. They do not suffer them. They will call them out very quickly and say, nope, sorry, you're talking absolute rubbish. Get out of my way. So I find myself still optimistic that she's renamed the government to the Department of Housing, Communities and Local Government, and she's taken out Levelling Up, because Levelling Up was just, failure, wasn't it? I'm happy that she's the Deputy Prime Minister and she's in charge of housing, the department that includes housing. It's a shame that the Housing Minister, Matthew Pennycook, is not in the cabinet, because that's also suggesting that housing as itself on its own is not important enough to be a cabinet topic. I think that's something that they could rethink. That would be a positive suggestion of mine. Anyway, do we have any more questions before I ramble on too much? No, it's true. There's very little experience or qualifications amongst most of these MPs. A couple of the cabinet were in the previous Labour cabinet. And it's fair to say that, how can they get any experience if they haven't had a chance for 14 years of Tory power? One of the other things is that they have appointed a Tory, which was it in the NHS? They've appointed an ex-Tory aide. And people have got cross with me for calling them the new Tories, but they really are. There's nothing left-wing about the Starmer government that I can see. Good question. Taliesin Walker, I hope I've pronounced that right. Do you think the tax system can be used to create the right incentives / disincentive to improve housing? Yes, 100%. I do think so. This is not my idea. I am standing on the shoulders of other people's ideas when I say this. But I think that scrapping stamp duty for residential property, completely scrapping council tax, and replacing them both with a land value tax makes a lot more sense. It deals with inequality better. It deals with empty properties better. It deals with landlords better and really makes sure that landlords have to be good quality. So that's one major thing that could be done, yes. And there are other things. So it is within the government's power to make real sweeping changes quite quickly if they want to. They should stop meddling around with policies in areas that they can't actually change stuff. Graham Woodward says design life for new builds years ago used to be 80 years, so 2 times mortgages. Yeah, I cannot see these ones lasting that long. I really, really can't. So Liam asked a question: where are they going to get the trades to build that many houses? I work for myself doing landscaping. All the boys are working for themselves or small construction companies in the Swansea area. So, because this is going to be quite a long-term thing, I genuinely think that it's an opportunity to create employment and train people up. I know close to nothing about construction itself. I don't know how long it takes to train, but I do know that on building sites, apprentices are a useful extra pair of hands and can learn skills. I remember, I don't know why, but I just remember back in the 80s, real prosperity on the back of a lot of building happening and construction of one kind or another. And that would also help stimulate the economy. So again, standing on the shoulders of other people's ideas is actually Russell Quirk's idea about a national house building organization, so a government owned and run house building company that could employ people. And this is the other thing. When you're building housing stock specifically for government housing obligations, as opposed to private housing needs, you need to design them to a specification where they're very, very hard wearing, right? So the materials that are used and the construction methods that are used mean that they're going to stand for a very long time, and they're going to be very, very hard wearing, and thus will not require so much maintenance and upkeep. The occasional lick of paint is going to be pretty much all it needs to freshen it up from time to time. That's what you need. The second thing is that there are currently 250,000 families in temporary accommodation. So that's 250,000 dwellings needed for the people in temporary accommodation now. And temporary accommodation at the moment is hotel rooms and bed and breakfasts. These are not places that you can live or turn your life around. They're merely places to sleep and wash. You can't have food in a fridge. You can't cook for yourself. You can't have friends around for a cup of tea. You can't live in temporary accommodation. And so one of the things that the government could do is create purpose-built temporary homes, as opposed to hotel rooms or bed and breakfasts, temporary homes that do have the ability to do your own washing and cleaning and your own cooking and a little table and some chairs that people can come around and have a cup of tea. A home where you can get back on your feet if life has chewed you up and spat you out and you find yourself, especially all those families who found themselves homeless through no fault of their own. They're in work, they're paid up, the landlord has had to sell up for whatever reason. Maybe they're being selfish, maybe they're not. There are all kinds of reasons why landlords have to sell up. I'm not necessarily blaming landlords here, but there are landlords who have evicted good tenants who've not been able to find a home and have found themselves in temporary accommodation, right? That is a massive setback to anyone's life progress. It's a massive setback for the children involved. And that's one of the massive returns on investment that the government would get. Instead of spending £1.7 billion a year paying hotels and bed and breakfasts to house people in temporary accommodation, just in England, it's 1.7 billion, right? If they were to use that to build purpose-built accommodation where it's most needed, to give people a faster chance to turn their life around, where the government is not having to pay out someone rent, right? They own the purpose-built accommodation for these temporary family homes. It's a win-win-win. It also takes pressure off the private sector. So where landlords are being used, it takes pressure off that, and therefore will bring rents down. There isn't another way, guys. This is the only way. Unless the government builds, there's no other way around it. MZ 2020 on X says, more 3-bed bungalows. That'll get the boomers moving. Very good point. Yeah, where it's needed, absolutely. Anthony Keeley says, I've got a tracker price on my bungalow. It says my place dropped 20k in 1 month. This is right move, yet they say prices are on the up. Haha. Okay. So let me catch up with some of your comments. Yeah. I genuinely think that the government could create a large amount of gainful employment, creating skilled tradespeople that would actually lift the country's economy and lift a lot of people out of destitution and into prosperity. Cheds1 says, they've not trained plenty of trades for 20 years now. Older lads getting out now. I think there's an opportunity to turn that around. I do. Hoddle My Beer says, I've worked in the construction trade and there's simply not enough people in any area of building to make this happen. That includes planning, building control too. Okay, but that's not an unsolvable problem though, is it? Right? It might take a bit of time, but how long does it take to train up tradespeople? Yeah, the modern equivalent of prefabs. So prefabs have a bad rep from back in the day, but the modern ones, they're brilliant. I've seen them. I've experienced them in Scandinavia. They're fantastic. They're very, very clever. They're safe. They're secure. They're strong. They're sturdy. They're really energy efficient, and they don't take long to build. Ricky Heath says, in the 50s, prefabs solved the post-war housing shortage. Yep. Okay, this is where I do agree with you. Hoddle My Beer says, but it's destined to fail if they are intent on using private companies. Basically, either force them to build, which means they can charge what they want, or they're asked to build and they're still building purposely to drive down supply. I agree. And that's why I think the government has to employ their own very skilled managers with experience from the trade, who know how to build quality stuff and who are remunerated on the successful outcome and construction of government-owned housing that would save the taxpayer billions of pounds a year, improve social opportunities and social mobility where it's most needed. And it's not even a socialist move, because this is a capitalist move. It's the government, it's the taxpayer investing in taxpayer-owned assets that save the taxpayer money. It's capitalism. Assets, asset-based capitalism. The government's been selling off the family silver and assets for decades, and that's why we're in the shit state that we're in. Jason Stockley says, new build houses, how much do you lose immediately on purchase? Percentage roughly, i.e. like new car forecourt prices. It's about 20%. It's about 20%, in my opinion. So yeah, not all developers. So I know that this, as far as I'm aware, the construction company where I am, they're all employees of the company and they're all locals. They're local full-time employees, and you just sense actually that there is a bit of pride in their work, and they're really helpful and friendly, and they do seem to take pride in their work. You don't get the feeling that they're just contractors who are here to get paid contractor rates and then whistle off somewhere. Hoddle My Beer says, let's hope they make that choice, but it's almost too sensible for the uni party. I'm afraid you're right. I don't see them doing it. But I'm gonna try and just raise awareness of that plan. See if Rusty Quirk and I can get together and try, because we actually agree on this plan. We agree on this plan. Yeah, that's a good point, actually. So Chris Dickinson asks Ched, if you get planning easily, would you consider building properties on a small scale? That's the other thing. Self-builds, right? The government should encourage people to be able to buy small plots of land for self-builds. They really should. It's too hard to do that at the moment. I can't remember. I don't remember the name of the company off the top of my head that built the home I'm living in now, which I'm renting. Yeah, but it's not a national house builder. It's a local one. It's a regional one. That's a good, interesting. So Ched says, never been out of work ever. Decent trowel, always work. Recessions get rid of rubbish trades. That's very true. Yeah. Holding My Beer says, Spain, Germany, Poland all have self-builds, almost more than major builders. Community self-builds is the answer, says Ched's one. Yeah, I totally agree. Yeah, but it's generally land costs and finance that are the problem. Quite right. And that's why the land value tax would shake things up massively and really improve things. Patricia says, would love to buy land and employ a builder to build my home. No land available, sadly. You see, one of the ways that the property industry works is that before land ever hits the open market, it's already been snapped up by developers. Right? It's very, very hard for retail buyers, so individual buyers, to find plots of land to build on, because they're all just snapped up. And one of the reasons, and this is something that the Labour government could change, is that there is currently a capital gains tax. It's not a loophole, it's a scheme intended to keep investment going in building, which says that if you invest the proceeds, the profits from one building development, into a new one, the next one, instead of taking the profits, then you don't pay capital gains tax on that money. And that's encouraging a lot of builders to go and buy up that land years before they need to build on it. Right, guys, I'm afraid I've got to go, actually. Thanks very much for watching, as ever. And I'll talk to you all soon. Thanks, guys. Bye. Actually, no, I do. Before I go, I do feel like I've got to just say hello to all the new subscribers, because there are lots and lots and lots of you, and give you the basics. If you need me, so I can help. If you are buying or selling or renting or anything else, and you need help or advice or guidance, there are different ways in which you can get that from me. The freest way is to go back through my video archive and look for the videos, answer the questions that you want to ask. There are hundreds, literally hundreds of videos. If you are happy to ask the question public with a video or audio clip, I guarantee to answer it on my channel. Send me an audio clip or a video clip. Don't need to identify who you are, just a first name would be nice. In fact, not even a name if you don't want to give a name, but a video or audio clip with your question, and I'll answer it on the channel. I can post the content so I answer the question to the benefit of all my followers. If you want to do it privately, you can join my £15 a month live movers Q&A club, which is on my website, mhwc.co.uk, or buymeacoffee.com/mhwc. Let me get these URLs up. And you can also book a one-to-one. So here's the URL for that. Book a one-to-one video call with me, either a 30-minute one or a 1-hour one, if you want me to just have me to yourself on a video call to deal with your whatever your conundrum is. I'm here to help. If you are a buyer and you want to buy a home, you don't need to worry what house prices are doing, because if you need a home to live in, then you should always buy one now, provided you've got one you can afford and you're not overpaying for it. Golden rule, make sure before you go out viewing properties that you've already spoken to an independent mortgage broker and you've got a decision in principle lined up. You'll be taken much more seriously by agents if you do have your own mortgage decision in principle ready before you go and book the first viewings. Secondly, it will avoid you being sucked into a less scrupulous mortgage broker that the agent might make you want to use. So independent whole of market mortgage broker, very important. Go and talk to one first before you start viewing. Also have your conveyancer lined up and a property search pack ready if you want to make offers that are way below asking and you want to get them accepted, or you want to have your offer be more competitive with other buyers by being more ready. mhwc.co.uk/mortgage, the same /conveyancing for my conveyancers. And the guys I work with are handpicked because I trust them. All right. And if you're a seller, and there are more and more and more of you out there selling now, trying to sell, and the stock levels are going up and up and up. It's got very, very quiet because of the election. The summer, I don't know what's going to happen. I think I'm suspecting it's going to stay quite quiet. I don't think there's going to be a huge bounce back after the election. There'll be a small bounce back of activity from the election, but I'm not sure it's going to survive through the summer. I think the autumn is going to be the next real chance of any real activity in the housing market. There'll be isolated areas that are busy always, but if you're selling, and I cannot stress this, if you need to sell, right? Not if you're, well, I'll sell if I get the right price for it. You're not a seller, that's a chancer. But if you need to sell and want to sell and are prepared to accept the best market price you can get for your home, before you talk to agents, get a conveyancer lined up. So you say to the agents, I am contract ready. So get yourself, talk to conveyancers. And if you can't find one that you trust, do not go cheap with conveyancers if you need to sell. Talk to conveyancers, find one you really like that you think's really high service quality, answers calls quickly, returns calls quickly, etc. And ask them to get you contract ready. Then go and talk to agents, because agents, I guarantee you, will give you a lower fee if you are contract ready, because you are demonstrating to them that you are a serious seller. You are also making their job easier to sell your house if you're contract ready. It will not cost you any extra to do this, by the way. So you'd be bananas not to be contract ready as a seller before choosing your agent. You could probably offset the entire cost of conveyancing with a reduction in the agency fee, depending on what level of the market you're at, just by being contract ready in advance if you're serious, okay? Don't go, if you sign up with an agent, don't go with their in-house conveyancer recommended standard bollocks, because it's just not going to be good for you. Unless it's a small agent and they convince you that it's a personal relationship with the conveyancer they've worked with for a long time because they're the best, then you should take that recommendation. But treat most recommendations with real skepticism. Like 9 out of 10 times, you should be skeptical about recommendations. But sometimes they are good, and it's, you just try and watch out for the good ones, the really good ones. Of course, if you're selling and buying, you need to talk to a mortgage broker as well, probably. So talk to a mortgage broker as well before you go to the agents. But go to the agents fully contract ready. You'll get a much faster sale. That's right. The agent will give you a lower fee. You're going to get a faster sale because a buyer will find your property more attractive if it's contract ready. And it doesn't cost any extra to be contract ready up front. So you're not having to spend any more than you otherwise would to be contract ready as a seller. You're just going to have to do the paperwork up front, right? That's all you have to do. But having your paperwork done up front means that your property will be much more attractive to the buyers who are out there and are buying than the properties that aren't contract ready. You're also more attractive to the agent, so you're going to have a much quicker sale. You're going to discover the best price, as long as you choose your agent like your future depends on it. You will discover the best price for your property quicker that way than any other way. I say this every time I talk about sellers, but so few of you do it. It's just unbelievable how few of you listen to me and you go and talk to agents first. It's free advice. What I'm suggesting doesn't cost any extra, and still you don't do it. Like selling your home isn't hard enough already, you're going to pass up this completely free and impartial advice. Don't even use my conveyancers. Just go and use some other ones, but please use a conveyancer, one that you trust, to get you contract ready before you go to agents. And those of you who do take me up on that advice, I'd love your feedback on how the agents react when you tell them, I've already got a conveyancer and I'm coming to the market contract ready. They will just go, they won't believe it. They won't believe it. They'll be like, oh my God, I want your business so much. They will fall over themselves to win your business at that point, because you've just made their job infinitely easier. You still need their skills because they've still got to market your house correctly at just the right price to get the maximum amount of interest for your property and get the competing buyers to discover what the market's best price for your property is. So there's still a lot of important stuff they have to do. But once they find you the buyer, the transaction will be much quicker if you're contract ready. Ramble. I'm going to shut up now, unless there are any last questions here on this topic. Oh, Ricky, so are you saying that that's what you did? Very surprised, especially having the search pack. What were you saying about that? Just trying to find if I've missed a comment from earlier about that. Anyway, must go, guys. Must go. Thanks very much. I hope to see you on the next live stream, and I look forward to hearing from you if you need my help via my website or buymeacoffee.com/MHWC. Links to those below. Thanks, guys. See you soon. Bye-bye.